There's no question that President Trump has said that the one issue area in the world, which is Ukraine, that he's going to really fundamentally alter American foreign policy, is in that conflict. And as you said, he says he's going to shut it down very quickly. I do not believe he's going to shut it down very quickly. I believe he may have good intentions, but it's not going to happen. And the reason is that he would have to accept terms that Putin has laid down to settle this one that I believe no American president would ever accept. And specifically, Putin has said before he will even negotiate, this is to begin negotiations to come up with a peace settlement, the West, and here we're talking mainly about the United States and Ukraine have to accept two conditions. One, that Ukraine will never be in NATO, either de jure or de facto, that Ukraine will be a neutral state, a genuinely neutral state. And furthermore, that the West and Ukraine have to accept the fact that Crimea and the 4 oblasts that the Russians have now annexed are permanently lost. They're permanently part of Russia. And again, Putin is saying, before I even begin negotiations to settle this, to come up with a peace agreement, you have to accept those two conditions. I find it hard to imagine the United States, even President Trump, accepting those two conditions. I find it hard to imagine the Ukrainians accepting those two conditions. Now, one could argue that President Trump is a very special person, and he has views that are outside the mainstream, and he is, after all, the President of the United States. But the problem is that he is surrounded by people who have Russophobia in the extreme and have been super hawkish on Ukraine for years. It's not like Trump is bringing into office with him a good number of people who share his views about shutting down the Ukraine war. He's bringing into power, as is very clear, a bunch of hawks. And therefore, Trump is going to be surrounded by people who are not going to want to accept the conditions that Putin has laid out. So my view as to what's going to happen here is that this is going to be settled on the battlefield, and I believe the Russians are going to win an ugly victory. They're in the process of doing it. And at some point, you're going to get a frozen conflict, or you're going to get an armistice. And the end result is you're going to have bad relations between Russia on one side and the West and Ukraine on the other side for as far as the eye can see. I think this is a terrible situation, but I don't think that Trump is going to change things in any meaningful way and be able to come up with a meaningful peace agreement.
On my side, I can only agree totally with what Mr. Mearsheimer has said. And I would add, the situation is more radical that you have described, because the conditions put forward by Mr. Putin officially don't correspond to the real intentions of Russian Federation. So that was a kind of minimal conditions that were put in the front precisely because nobody could accept them on the West. So in the reality, the situation with Ukraine is much more existential and important for Russia. We could not tolerate any kind of Ukraine hostile to Russia, any versions in any borders, inside any borders. The point of agreement, consensus inside of Russia that the war will lead with the West in the Ukraine should end with our victory and nothing less. That is not just the vision of Mr. Putin. That is the condition of Putin to stay in power and to save our political regime. So that is much more than just hawkish or imperialist reactions or desires or dreams or something like that of emerging once again independent power in the Eurasia. It is much more than that. So, and I think nobody in the West understands that correctly, because for us to be or not to be as Russia, as Russian Federation, means to win or to lose the war in Ukraine. That's much more than the conditions that Putin has put forward. And Mr. Mearsheimer has very correctly explained, and I agree totally with this opinion, that these minimal and unsupportable and unacceptable conditions that Putin has put forward, they have no chance to be accepted by the future administration of Mr. Trump. With his agreement or against his will, I think there is the kind of geopolitical realist, if you want, logic that the West and United States could never, I would say, never accept not only expressed and explicit claims of Russia, but much less implicit claims of Russia that they go much more further than just keep in our possession the territories we have won or neutral status of Ukraine. So Mr. Mearsheimer has explained very well the realist balance of power in this situation.
偷偷告诉大家，我最近发现了新法宝 Royal Face 逆时奇迹系列，它有活肤露、全效精华，还有精华霜。尤其我皮肤比较偏干，所以我非常的注重保湿。保湿做得好，肌肤自然烹润。提亮肤色更年轻，抚平皱纹超有感，而且气色变好。用心保养，每天都更美一点。美吧。